some topics, challenges, issues in DTN, so on and so forth. But today we will be focusing on the application of DTN or delay-tolerant network in disaster management. Especially, we'll be trying to find out the challenges we face while offering the services in post-disaster center. Now, there are quite a lot of unknown terms. What is post-disaster scenario? What are the services normally offered in post-disaster scenario? So, we have to have an idea on that. So, outline of my presentation is like that. First, we will discuss on post-disaster scenario. Then, different disaster management services offered in post-disaster scenario. Then, the role of delay-tolerant network in supporting communication need in post-disaster scenario. Then, major challenges in offering service over DTN, and then few approaches to address those challenges. This will be the outline of the presentation. So we know that after a disaster, what happens? Normally, the victims take shelter in nearby safe areas, be it school building, island areas, tents. Okay. So here we are showing a disaster-struck area where few shelters are established. Okay, there these victims are now staying. Now that is a remote area where the disaster has occurred. Now we are going back to the disaster management services offered by DMA. What is DMA? Disaster Management Operator. They are normally located at the cities, metro cities. They are monitoring and controlling the operations sitting at the cities. But the disaster has already occurred in some remote corners. So they have no clue what has already happened there, what is the exact situation out there. So they have no information about that. But they have to manage the disaster. How they can manage? They have to find out the need of the victims, and they have to allocate resources. But they have no priority information about the need of the victims. So what they normally does? They allocate resources in an ad hoc manner. They just put the resources on a supply truck and send the truck to the disaster affected region. They don't know actually where the demand is much and where the demand is less. So somehow they are channelizing resources to some part of the disaster affected area, and some part may remain underserved. Okay, so there lies a challenge. Why? There is a gap or problem in resource allocation because they don't have the information about the disaster-struck area. Then how to send information from disaster-struck area to the control station where disaster management authorities are located? We have to have some communication infrastructure through which we can say that, see, I need tarpaulin, I need some food, baby foods are needed. Then we need some communication infrastructure to convey my needs. But normally in the face of disaster, what happens? Communication infrastructures are partially or fully down. So what will happen? We have to set up some temporary infrastructure, communication infrastructure to support the need of communication. Okay? The objective is clear now. So, what can be done to form a temporary network? Delay-tolerant network is a kind of choice that can be applied in such scenarios. coming from different places, but they are very inadequate information. But they are going to the disaster management authority analyzes the situation. Based on the analysis, it assesses the need of different parts of the disaster struck area and then allocate the resources. But since the communication infrastructure is not always available, then what will happen? There will be a information gap. So we have to bridge the gap. So what is now happening? There is partial fulfillment of demand and the needs are constantly changing, dynamically changing. Why the needs are changing? Because some other victims may join a particular shelter. Some people may be relocated to some other shelters. So the need of shelters are constantly changing. So disaster management authority should track those changes in need and should allocate the resource accordingly. Then there will be proper resource management. So now we are clear that we have to have proper need assessment for proper resource allocation. But the primary input is situational data that needs to be communicated over some delay-tolerant group. As I told you that some bits and pieces of information are coming from different sources, and NDTV has accumulated some of those data about Uttarakhand disaster and they have displayed it on a map. See what they are saying: at Shibpur 100 people are awaiting evacuation. About 5,000 people are stranded at Bodrina. This kind of messages are coming, but that are not sufficient. That are giving us some snapshot of the actual scenario. But we have to gather information about the total scenario, complete information about the total scenario, which is missing here. Where the shelters are set up, where the control stations are set up, medical camps are set up where. So that kind of information are needed. Google has done an endeavor in which they have developed a crisis map of Uttarakhand where they have displayed where the shelters, medical camps, relief camps are set up. They have shown it on the Google map as a pink, different colored pink. And they have also displayed what are the groups, volunteer groups working in that region. So from news agencies, from Google Crisis Map, from NDTV, we have gathered the information that several groups of Army, IAF, Indo-Tibetan Border Force, National Disaster Response Force, Indian Red Cross Society and many other NGOs took part in the disaster management operation of Uttarakhand. So information are coming, but it is inadequate. So we have to set up a communication. Now we are quite convinced. Now how to set up a communication? We need some communication device. So if that device is very heavy, very power hungry, we cannot use it. Why? Because after a disaster, there is limited power supply, inadequate power supply. Communication is disrupted and transport is often disrupted. Roads are blocked in some part of the disaster. So you cannot just say heavy duty communication devices to that region. So we have to set up the network with the regular common devices, common battery operated devices. Okay. So what are the common battery operated devices available nowadays? Laptops, cell phones, tabs, and common people are now using cell phones. So you can assume that you will get plenty of cell phones in the disaster struck area. You can make use of those cell phones, laptops to set up a temporary communication network. See here I have written in blue that network should be rapidly deployable. If you take lot of time to set up the network, then it will not be efficient. You have to send your information immediately. So you cannot afford to high time to set up the network. You cannot afford high time to set up the network. So what we will do? We will find the entities that are normally associated with the disaster management scenario. And what are the devices available with you? How they can communicate with each other. So we have to use them. So what are the entities involved in post-disaster scenario? There are victims, volunteers. Volunteers can be categorized in two parts: rescue workers, relief distributors, and then there are officials, government and non-government officials. There are emergency vehicles like medical van, police van, supply vehicles, army jeeps, helicopters, and so on. And there are few points of interest in disaster management scenario. What are those points of interest? The people work around those points of interest. So victims normally take shelter in some school buildings. We often call them as shelters. There are relief camps set up by the medical agencies, some government agencies. There are other medical centers. There are resource points where the rations are stored. There are control rooms. Okay, so those are the points of interest around which the entities are working. And their mobility patterns. Why are we interested in mobility patterns? Because we are thinking of making a delay-tolerant network which is set up by the mobility of the devices. If two mobile devices come in the vicinity of each other, then what will happen? A temporary link will be established and the communication will be set up. But when the devices go away from each other, the link will be cut and there will be no communication among those two devices. So mobility pattern plays an important role in setting up a delay-tolerant network. So what is the kind of mobility pattern of these entities in post-disaster scenario? Victims normally stay in center. Okay? Or even if they are mobile, their mobility is very restricted and that is almost always around the shelter. And volunteers, there are two types of volunteers. The relief distributors, they are normally assigned to work around the shelter. And very rarely they need to visit some other shelter to send some information or to get something. Okay? Now the rescue workers, what is their mobility pattern? They are involved in search and rescue operation. They move around randomly throughout the disaster-struck area in search of the stranded people. Okay? Now the officials. Officials normally, they are the monitoring authority. They visit shelters, relief camps, resource points and control rooms to monitor the situation. The emergency vehicles, they move across different shelters, different resource points. Okay? So now what we have to do? We have to set up a network with cell phones or wireless handheld devices, Wi-Fi towers and VSAT terminals. You may say that why VSAT terminals, Wi-Fi towers? They are quite heavy devices. How can you send those things? But in a post-disaster scenario, there are places where roads are not blocked. At least at that region, you can send some VSAT terminals mounted on some car or jeep. So they can go there, they can serve the communication need. So that network is definitely will be fragile in nature, but will serve the immediate communication need. Links are established as well when entities come in the vicinity due to their physical mobility. Sparse networks are formed and the gaps are bridged by physical mobility. Now, why sparse networks are formed? Do you have any idea? Because shelters may be located some kilometers away, two shelters may be located some kilometers away. Then groups of volunteers working in that shelter and another shelter, there may not be any other in between to send data from this shelter to that shelter, because the mobile phone range is not kilometers. Then what will happen? There will be sparse network. So there will be a gap in the communication. So that gap has to be bridged. How to bridge that gap? If you are in a jeep with a mobile phone and you are visiting the first shelter and then moving towards the second shelter, then you can gather information from first shelter and gather information from second shelter and then go back to the control station and send the information to the control station. All will be automated, but you have to have some mobile device to bridge the gap. Here, physical mobility helps in setting up the network. So, it is quite evident that delay is inherent in this kind of network as no end-to-end path exists. Because when your data will reach the control station, you have no clue. It depends on the opportunity when two nodes meet and exchange their information. That is totally opportunistic and probabilistic in nature. So here we are trying to map the mobility model of post-disaster entities with our common existing mobility models. There are mobility models like random waypoint model, map-based movement model, cluster movement model. Those are quite common mobility models. Okay. So what is map-based movement model? It is a random movement mobility model where nodes are following path segments on a map. So yesterday you were working with the maps of Helsinki, where the disaster management entities or volunteers were moving along the paths, not randomly. We were moving randomly, but we were following some specific paths. Okay. So that is map-based movement. And then random waypoint movement model, you are quite familiar with it, where entities move around randomly. Cluster movement model, what is that? Nodes move towards different direction from a certain point and return to that point periodically. So, if we map this with the disaster management scenario, what will happen? We can see that volunteers who are assigned to some shelters, they every day morning they start from their respective camps for the shelters. They walk around that shelter throughout the day, and after in the evening they go back to their own camps. This is the kind of mobility model here, cluster movement model. And Yusufuddin is a famous researcher in this field. He has developed one mobility model which is specifically useful in this kind of scenario. It is named as post-disaster mobility model, where entities involved in post-disaster communication, their mobilities are described. So when we will devise any strategy, we will use this kind of mobility model. We will use of this kind of mobility models. Now comes delay-tolerant network architecture. Now tell me why architecture is needed. So far it was a story. Now suddenly some architecture comes. Why?
Because we need to communicate anyway. And for
Sorry?
that we need an architecture to understand which entity is performing what function.
Exactly. Which entity will be performing what function? We have several kind of devices. What kind of architecture will be suitable to send the data so that data can be reached to the control station in minimal delay? We have to find out the suitable architecture. So different multi-tier architectures are available, starting from flat architecture. We can set up different kind of architectures with the available devices. With cell phones only, cell phones and mobile laptops, we can set up a flat architecture. Say, I want to send data from this room to the gate. Okay? And we have assumed a flat architecture. Then what will happen? I will first find out whoever is within my vicinity. I will send my data to some suitable node in my vicinity. He will then send the data to some of his neighbors, and in this way data will be sent to the gate in multiple hops. So it is a possible solution, definitely. But what is the problem in this solution? It will take a long time. In between, data may be dropped. Data may get corrupted. So flat architecture is not always a good architecture. Okay? There may be communication gap. So in between two buildings, there may not be any device who will send your data. So flat architecture is easy to implement, but it is not always good. So here comes the need for two-tier architecture. You can realize a two-tier architecture by introducing another static device. Say a high-end laptop with larger memory capacity, high battery power. What you can do? For all the communication in this building, all the communication from this building will be directed to that laptop. All the communication from that building will be communicated to the laptop which is located there. If those two laptops are somehow connected with the access points, then you will be able to send your data from this building to that building to the gate. Okay? This is a comparatively better architecture. Why? Because delay is minimized, chance of data loss is minimized. Okay? So this is how the data is sent to the temporary laptops. This kind of architecture is called Dropbox or Dropbox architecture. That laptop may be replaced by sector devices. Okay. Now comes the three-tier architecture. Say you have two-tier architecture, but in between there is a gap. How to bridge the gap? By this time, we are quite confident that we need a mobile node. Okay? So, this mobile node will get the data from that station and this station and send it to the control station when it is going back to the control station. So, this is the introduction of third entity. So, it is called three-tier architecture. And the third entity is called data mules or vehicular nodes or mobile access points. That may also be a communication system. And then a four-tier architecture. What is four-tier architecture? Bridging geographically sparse region. That means I am here, I want to communicate some data at traffic. Geographical is fast location. And no car is going towards that region. So how to bridge the gap? So we can make use of Wi-Fi tower or WiMAX tower to bridge the gap. Okay? That is 4-tier architecture. Okay? Clear? Here is some list of existing work done on DTN architecture. Okay, some references are also here. You will get this presentation soon. Just to mention that this 4-tier hybrid architecture is designed and developed in our group who are working at NIT Durga. Now we have to find a suitable architecture. Okay? Either we can select flat or 1, 2, 3, any tier architecture. Then we have to find out, select a routing method. Why do we need a routing method? Say multiple devices are available in my neighborhood. Whom to forward the data? Okay? So I need a routing protocol. What are the popular DTN routing protocols available? Yesterday, in Kamok's lecture, we have heard of different kind of routing protocol. Some are replication based, some are single copy. I am not going into the details. So these are the list of routing protocols and their references. He has already explained, so I am not going into the details. So now we know that different kind of architectures are available, different kind of routing protocols are available, and the entities in the disaster management scenario follow some kind of movement pattern. Now what is my next goal? I have to find out an energy efficient and cost effective DTN framework, combining a suitable DTN architecture and suitable routing scheme for my application specific mobility pattern. Okay. We have done an extensive study on this, and one of our paper got accepted in Wireless Networks journal on this. So it is the glimpse of the paper, a summary sheet. There, what is our findings? We have seen that 3-tier architecture is quite suitable and energy efficient. And along with that, we can use either spray and wait routing protocol or max prop routing. That will give you an efficient method of, that will give you an efficient mode of routing your data in minimal way, minimal delay. Okay. Now there is a problem. We need to send the data in a reliable way. Reliability is a major concern in wireless communication. Why? What is the problem? Because in wireless communication we are not using anywhere. So our data is not protected. Anybody can intercept the data, anybody can corrupt the data. There are malicious nodes. They have malicious intentions. Maybe they want to channelize the resource to their point of interest. So some resources are coming for some other region, they want to channelize the resource to their region. That kind of stuff happens. So we have to find out which nodes are malicious. Otherwise, my data will never reach to the control station. And since the nodes are using battery power, some of the nodes may want to save their battery power. They may not want to relay your message. But DTN is based on cooperative communication. Unless some other node relays your message will never reach receiver. So you need the cooperation of other nodes. If that cooperation is not present, then you cannot send your data. So we have to find out, we have to select a suitable forward. We have to check whether the node whom I am forwarding, whether he is trustworthy or not, whether he will definitely further forward my data or he will just drop my data. I have to check that. Otherwise, I cannot send my data to the control station. So reliability is a major concern. So there are selfish node or non-cooperative node. That means nodes who forward selective messages after acceptance or discard all messages excepting his own message. So there are these kind of things. There are individual selfishness who want to conserve their battery power. They are personally selfish. They are doing that for their personal benefit. But there is one other kind of selfishness which is called social selfishness, which is called group bias. My students are smiling. They have that kind of selfishness. So, group means we are social people. We are all have paper books with whom we mingle around. So, what is social selfishness? We are taking data from different sources but forwarding only the data for my groups. The volunteers normally work in groups. So we have selected such a forwarder who is very group bound, who has a very much group bias. So that means he will only send his own group's data and he will discard all others' data. So we have to detect that first and we have to avoid them while forwarding the data. And there are other kind of malicious nodes who intercept the message and corrupt them with malicious intention. So what is our objective now? We have to detect the selfish node and avoid them in data forwarding. And then the next step will be securing the message from being corrupted. Okay. So we have used reputation and trust-based detection of shellfish nodes. What is trust? In our social life also we use trust. We normally send the data to those persons whom we believe, who are trustworthy, according to our belief. So trust means whether to trust a node as an ideal forwarder. It normally depends on what others say about him. What is its reputation? What others say about him? And what is my opinion about him? So both will act as parameters in detecting the reputation or estimating the reputation of the node. So there are two types of trust management mechanism. One is credential-based trust management and the other is reputation-based trust management. And what we are currently working on reputation-based trust management. So for reputation estimation, we are depending on the raters who are rating other nodes. But the raters rating may suffer from bad mouthing and other stuff. What is bad mouthing? Bad mouthing is a phenomenon in which a malicious node ruins the reputation of a well-behaved node by providing bad reputation values against it. Okay? And what is ballot stuffing? It is just the opposite, in which a malicious node boosts the reputation of by providing good reputation can control. So many problems we have to solve them one by one. So we have designed the observer-based reputation estimation scheme, where we have assumed that the entire disaster-struck region is divided into some zones, and in each zone there are multiple shelters and multiple volunteers are walking around the shelter, and one observer is assigned to each zone for monitoring the cooperation characteristic of the nodes working place. Okay? So, whenever he meets, he is moving around throughout the zone. So, whenever he meets a node, he asks them how many packets we have received and how many packets we have forwarded. So, as he is an observer, node has to answer. So, he will give some in and in values. And then cooperation characteristic will be measured by number of received packet over number of forwarded. Okay. But there is a slight problem. Someone may lie. Okay. Then how to address that issue? We have solved that issue with the help of two kinds of tokens, encrypted tokens. When a successful communication occurs between the sender and the receiver, when receiver receives the message correctly, sender will issue the receiver an encrypted token which is called receiver trust token. Right? He has received the data correctly. And when sender forwards the entire packet to the receiver, receiver issues a forwarded trust token which is encrypted by the receiver's private key to the sender. Okay? So each node has gathered some amount of receiver trust token and some amount of forwarded trust token, and they are encrypted by the private key of the respective sender and receiver. So it is not possible for a node to generate fake tokens. So that is how that line can be handled. So what is the cooperation coefficient? I have already told you, total number of forwarded trust token by total number of receiver trust token. And how to calculate the group bias of a node as a receiver? Number of receiver trust token which is encrypted by the key of its group members, and the number of receiver trust token which is encrypted by the private keys of the non-group members. That means observer has a list of all the members and who belongs to which group. From that it can decode how many receiver trust token belonging to a group one has forwarded and how many receiver it receives. So based on that we can calculate the group bias of a node as a receiver and as a forwarder. If the group bias as a receiver is greater than 1, it indicates that the node prefers to receive data from its group member. If it is less than equal to 1, it indicates that the node shows no group bias as received. Similar is the case in the case of forwarder. Okay. So now we are either upgrading or downgrading the reputation of a node by the factor of k depending on the group bias. Initially, we assign all the nodes with same reputation. We don't know the reputation of all the nodes in the network. So we assign a common reputation to all the nodes. Then after observing the cooperation characteristic, what we are doing? We are upgrading it or downgrading it by the factor of K. Okay. So if at some point of time observer observes that a node has changed its selfish behavior, then the last node reputation will be upgraded or multiplied by a factor of K. If an observer finds that last node reputation of a node was up and currently the node is still found to be unbiased, then reputation will remain unchanged. And if a node has both the group bias as forwarder and as receiver, its reputation will be downgraded twice by the factor of K. So its reputation will be divided by K2. And if it has one of these group bias, reputation will be downgraded by K. Okay. Now comes the statistical estimation of the global reputation of the node. This is another paper. Okay. We are trying to estimate the global reputation of a node. What is global reputation? It means what others say about a node. Say I am staying in a locality. I want to know the reputation of some person whom I don't know. I'll go there. I'll ask some people out there, maybe his neighbors. So what is his reputation? Is it good? Is it bad? But while doing that, you can understand that I cannot get the reputation value from all the people residing out there. It is not possible practically. Maybe someone has gone to Andaman or a study. Then I cannot get the reputation of that man. How that person was visiting Andaman. So what I can collect? I can get a sample reputation. I cannot get the reputation about the person from all the persons. So what I can get? I can manage to get some sample reputation. From that sample, I have to calculate the global reputation of that man. Here statistics helps us. As we know that sample mean is an unbiased estimator of the population. So the samples we have collected, if we average out that, we can get the global reputation of the node. Okay. By this, we can also find out whether a reader's rating is suffering from backmounting or balance. How? We have already estimated the global reputation of a node. Okay, so it is out. Now I am finding out the estimation of a rater. I am evaluating a rater. Say rater has given, say in a scale of 10, the average reputation of a node is found to be 6. And some rater has rated him as 2. That means what he has done? He has backmounted. Okay? Then on the other hand, if his reputation is 6 and someone is saying that his reputation is 9.5, then it's catastrophic. Okay? So this way we can avoid those nodes. So now comes securing the data. We have identified the malicious. That part is done. Now I have to secure my data from the malicious access. So here I have to ensure authenticity, integrity and confidentiality. So what are the challenges? Unauthorized nodes may claim authenticity and launch different attacks on the network as no organizational trust is attached to it. What is organizational trust? If I belong to an organization, then I have some trust associated with it. I belong to Heritage. So Heritage has a goodwill. So if I belong to Heritage, that means I am unknown situational information or distort messages either by wiping out some part of it or stuffing garbage into it, or may be responsible for content leakage and corruption. Somebody may be sitting simply listening to what is going on, and he may channelize. He may take access to that data and he may wipe out some part, add his own part, and may send the data to the control station so that resource can be channelized to his regime. Selfish nodes may drop legitimate packet, that is to disrupt the data activity, that is there. So we have done another work on group-based distributed authentication and multi-layer hash encryption mechanism. Here what will be done? In group-based distributed authentication mechanism, forwarder nodes mutually authenticate each other as registered member of valid distribution. So I want to send you some data. I will first evaluate whether you belong to a proper rescue group or not, volunteer group or not. In the same way, you will also evaluate me whether I am a proper party to send you some data. So here the problem is we cannot assume any trusted authority. Nobody is there to issue any certificate that he is a good member. He is not my friend. So we have to do it dynamically. And then multi-layer hash encryption scheme. What is that? Groups collaboratively contribute to preserve confidentiality and integrity of situational message. So how that can be done? That will be described in the next slide. So that scheme helps the forwarded nodes in detecting the integrity of a message at each hop without accessing the content. So we are sending the data to the next forwarder. Next forwarder will check the message somehow, but cannot access or wipe out the message. Cannot access the plain text. It is secure. But somehow, from that secured encrypted part, we will be able to understand whether it is a legitimate packet or not. Okay? Taking decision on whether to forward the message further. If it finds that it is a corrupted packet, we will immediately drop it. And if it drops it, then if it removes the corrupt packet from the network immediately, then no further bandwidth will be wasted that corrupt. Okay? So that was our objective. So here, how the forwarders are authenticated? Each member, we assume that it belongs to a valid group having unique, private and public group field. We are already aware of public and private, they are individual groups. But since disaster management operation is not an individualistic operation, it is a group-based operation. So instead of keeping private and public key individually, we are keeping group pin to validate that whoever is having a group pin, he is a registered member of that group. Okay. For mutual authentication, using challenge and response scheme, there are several steps involved. What are they? Sender and receiver both generates unique random number and exchange data, say R1 and R2. And sender, you are the receiver, we both will generate some R1 and R2. Sender will generate a hash H depending on R1, R2 and sender's public and send it to the receiver. And on the receiving end, receiver also knows R1, R2 and sender's public key. Then he can also estimate a hash. If those two hash matches, then that means they are valid independence. So that kind of evaluation is done both for forward node and the sender. So this is the mutual.
Since R1 and R2 are random numbers, so there is a probability that key may get duplicate. Since all these are pseudo-random numbers and we are taking hash of R1, R2, so it may, I don't know, I believe it may land up in creation of duplication.
The chance is very less.
Duplication of keys.
So it depends on the random number
generator function. Anyway, it will give a pseudo-randoms, and this hash function is having a overhead.
Okay, this is the baby of Shobik. I think Shobik will be able to answer you more clearly. Shobik, please stand up. Now.
See, since basically the hashing is done depending upon the sender's keys, and since the sender's keys are basically made like that, then each individual group will have a different type of key. Right? So there is a very, very little chance, or in fact there is 0 probability that one particular hash for a group and one particular hash for a different group will be same, because the groupings are so selected that hashes will never.
But these hash functions are different for different groups or same?
The same hash function is being used for the multiple groups.
So if the same.
The thing is like the groupings are so selected that the hashes will not at all equal for two different groups. Right? Say for example, group 1 is actually having a grouping called GP1, and a group 2 is basically having a grouping called GP2. GP1 and GP2 are so selected that the hash of group 1 say H1 and the hash of group 2 say H2, they will not be
But
same.
this hash will depend on R1 and R2, which are random numbers.
Absolutely. But see, while creating this hash called H, there is one component called the key.
Yeah, that is the hash of R1 and R2.
No. This is basically a hash of R1, R2 and the keys.
Sender's
Oh,
public.
R1, R2, comma, sender's public. Right.
And since the groupings are so selected that they will not at all match, so there is a very little chance or absolutely no
Okay.
chance that the hashes will match.
Then it's.
Okay.
Clear? Now, how to preserve the data integrity? So here we have assumed that data flows from shelter to the control station. Any intermediate node may intercept and corrupt the message during forwarding. That is the problem. So how to solve that problem? We have solved this using multi-layer encryption. We are not encrypting it once. We are encrypting with multiple keys. Now, the idea is to encrypt the message with few layers of encryption with few public group pins, so that an intermediate forwarded node can remove only one encryption layer with its own group pin, and the message will always be protected by Q-1 layer of encryption. This concept is basically based on a famous routing protocol which is called onion routing protocol. This concept is taken from here. So there are different layers of encryption. The intermediate node then checks the integrity of the encrypted message and takes the forwarding decision based on that. This way, no intermediate node gains access to the message in the clear text. Also, all nodes use the same encryption technique, and the technique is commuted. Okay. So now we have reliably and securely sent our data over a network architecture using a routing protocol to the control station. Now the next part is we have received some snapshot from different paths. We have to make a coherent global view of the entire situation. We have to integrate the situational snapshots. Okay? We have done a work on this, and this paper got accepted in a very popular conference. What's the name? Conference. So, generating a coherent and comprehensive situational view is very much required, which will be consistent for all the workers as well as the control station, irrespective of their location and mobility. Normally what happens, the volunteers who are working around the region, they have better knowledge about their local region and almost no knowledge about a remote region. So there is a gap in perception. Okay? We want to minimize that. One, say I am having a mobile phone, I have the information of my entire region, but I don't have the information about Jammu. But I need that. Why do I need that? Say my control station is at Delhi and I need some resource. But for that, if I have to send the data to Delhi, that is a long-term process. But if I know that this kind of resources available in excess in Yadavpur area, I can very well go there and collect the resource from there. So I have to have a comprehensive global view of the entire disaster struck area. Which resources are available in which area. So that will help us to manage the resources in a better way. Okay? So map-based visual representation of such global situational data on the smartphone help the volunteer to identify the need, resource availability and distribution of resources. Such a view may provide the understanding of general view of distribution of different categories of resources all over the entire area, and that will also help us to identify possibly underserved areas where there are not of resources. To find out a coherent global view, we have made use of two types of mobility pattern of volunteers. One is spatial locality and the other is spatial regularity. What is spatial locality? It suggests that a person usually moves within its local region. That we always do. Normally, we move around our locality. What is spatial regularity? Spatial regularity is a property of human mobility that indicates that people generally have a tendency of returning to few frequently visited places. So in the morning, I start from my house to the college and go back to my house in the evening. So there is a regular pattern in my mobility. So that is spatial regularity. We have exploited these two characteristics of mobility to make or develop a comprehensive global view of the situation, where we have assumed that all the volunteers, they are meeting each other very frequently, they are gathering the local snapshot, and they always have the accurate information about its locality. And when they have got an opportunity to visit some other place and meet someone from that place, then that someone will also have an accurate knowledge about that locality. If they exchange those two knowledge, then what will happen? Both of them will now have the knowledge about both the localities. So when they are going back to their respective localities, they will then distribute that knowledge, newly found knowledge. Both are accurate. So that way you will be able to form a coherent global view of the entire situation. Okay, just by exploiting the mobility of volunteers. The simulation. So initially the perception gap of the volunteers were quite huge. That was displayed in the first graph. By using our skill, the perception gap was minimized, and the right hand side figures, they are showing the snapshot of global view which are acquired by the two volunteers, which are almost similar. Okay, so now our objective of situational data gathering is now complete. Okay, so we have managed to address all the issues. So that's all for today. Now next speaker has already come. Thank you. Thank you for your patience. So there will be a tea break, and then next session will be starting from 11:15.